Happy Friday morning, everybody, and thanks for checking in to our latest TDR Trade to Black podcast. As usual, I am your host, Shad Dales. Lots going on here this morning, including SNDL, who reported their latest earnings pre-market here this morning. We're going to dive into that and outline some of the key numbers. We did reach out to Zach George. He's probably going to come on with us, hopefully in the next week or so, to talk more about a lot of things regarding their earnings, regarding Sunstream, all the things that you guys want to know about as well. Ben Kovler outlines on Twitter this morning that Ohio is going to go live adult use on Tuesday. So that's interesting to say the least. And then as well, Kyle Kazan, CEO of GLASF Brands, he submitted a letter to President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and former President Donald Trump this week on how this industry needs full-on descheduling, not rescheduling. He'll explain why as we have him as our featured guest here this morning. So let's jump into it and welcome in TDR co-host Anthony Varrell. Good to see you. Happy Friday morning. And, you know, usually we're chilling on a Friday morning, but it looks like there's a lot going on here this morning, right?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, Ben came out with the Ohio tweet. TerraSend announced $140 million debt financing. SNDL had earnings come out.
Yeah.
Which there was a lot to like. And I mean, I know they missed analyst expectations, but aside from that, the numbers look great. And there's just a lot going on. Yeah, it's been a busy week so far and a busy end to the week.
Drew Dinkins, I hear you, buddy. The market is getting smoked right now. It's all over the place. We're just talking. Dan from TheChartGuys is going to be coming on actually later today to talk about some of the macro stuff. But have you been seeing a lot of this stuff right now? It's just crazy as to what's going on, even outside of the U.S.
Yeah. The Nikkei got smoked. Japan's economy is, I don't want to say faltering, but it's starting to show some cracks. And I mean, when you have the amount of exposure that they have to our debt and just how we're symbiotically related, paired with weak earnings from a couple of the big tech giants. I mean, this is where you get the 5 to 10% correction in the broad market.
Yeah, and the whole angle of Iran this week. Well, let's just see what happens there. But a lot of things going on in this world right now. But we focus on cannabis, and let's begin with Into the Wire here on a Friday morning, and probably a very important topic for a lot of our audience as we talk about SNDL and their latest earnings. Some of the notable highlights included net revenue of $228.1 million compared to $231.9 million same time period from a year ago, which showed a decrease of 1.6%. We'll get into that in just a moment, but also gross profit, $58.2 million, which represented a record gross margin of 25.5% of sales in this quarter, which was up 22.4% in the second quarter of 2023. So all in all, it looked like everything was up from their cannabis portfolio, Anthony. So I think that's encouraging because, yes, they do focus on liquor, but again, we continue to see quarter after quarter the rise of revenue pertaining to cannabis, right?
Yeah, I mean, they had a little bit of softness in their alcohol business. I mean, I like to think of the alcohol business more as a complementary business versus a focus.
Yeah.
For the overall SNDL enterprise, they break out their cannabis business revenue and their cannabis retail revenue, which those business units saw growth from a margin standpoint, from a revenue standpoint. Looked like a pretty healthy quarter. I mean, we'd love to dive in a little bit deeper with Zach next week. But aside from, like I said, the little bit of softness in the alcohol business, the cannabis business looks like it's doing its thing. It's still not truly into the green from a cash flow perspective, but I mean, it's definitely getting there.
Well, goes to show consumer trends are changing, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of that, especially in the States and Canada, with people going over from alcohol to cannabis.
Yeah. Also want to provide an update on their Sunstream portfolio, where this month Ascend Wellness repaid $12 million of their existing balance to Sunstream, along with Jushi making news earlier this week involving their refinancing announcement. And in that, they repaid their full outstanding balance of $53 million. So for those still trying to make sense of SNDL's U.S. portfolio, how is this then all structured, I guess, moving forward based off of the two things I just outlined, and how this is going to really help SNDL's U.S. strategy moving forward?
I don't know if it helps their strategy moving forward, as I mean, we've seen Zach's thesis with the Sunstream asset, with the Sunstream facility. Their investment thesis is they want to take over the assets. They don't want to get repaid, as we're seeing in parallel in Skymint. Ascend, obviously with the repayment, Jushi with the repayment takes two chess pieces off of the board.
Yep.
Potentially, they still have the cannabis exposure via the Sunstream facility. And then, like I said, they've got Parallel, Skymint,
Yep.
the south of the border, and then they've got Delta 9 and Indiva on the north of the border with the Canadian assets, which those will probably add. I think I see those as being accretive to the overall cannabis business in Canada. So I'm sure once they're dialed in, once their cost-cutting initiatives are executed, you'll start to see those be complementary to the overall Canadian cannabis business, as Indiva's got some
Agreed.
good brands that they're partnered with, and Delta 9, I'm sure, will create efficiencies as well. As far as Parallel goes, from my understanding, the Florida lawsuit has been settled. Skymint is still tied up in litigation, and neither of the assets, as per the investor presentation, have been equitized at this point. Those will truly become valuable to SNDL when they are equitized in the future. And those assets combined have about $250 million run rate on an annualized basis. So, I mean, those will definitely add to the value proposition of the overall SNDL vehicle as well.
Yeah. Jordan White, good to see you. Liquor in Canada is now back to about pre-COVID levels. It'll be interesting to see if this levels out now. Good point. But as I said off the top, reached out to Zach this morning. They're actually on calls with analysts this morning, so a full day for them. But we will keep you posted and hopefully set something up next week at some point as we kick off earnings season. A lot going on next week, that's for sure. I know, how many companies are there off the top of your head? 10, 12?
No, it's a lot. It's over 10.
Yeah. And we'll be ready for it. GTI kicks off on Monday. So, and as well, as I said off the top too, Ben Kovler on Twitter this morning, adult use looks like it's going to go live. What's that?
Ascend is on Monday as well.
Ascend's on Monday, but I was going to say about Ohio adult use going live on Tuesday. That's circulating around online right now. So that's interesting.
In cannabis industry fashion, Ben Kovler tweeted out that Ohio will go live on Tuesday. Tom from Marijuana Moment inquired with the Ohio Cannabis Authority, who said that actually there's no retail COs that have been granted as of yet. I would have to believe that Ben Kovler, from an operational perspective, has some sort of inside perspective as to what's going on. Those COs might be imminent today or granted over the weekend. And I would assume Ben is correct in his assumption when he says that AU sales will go live on Tuesday.
All right. Well, we'll know one way or another in the next 3 to 4 days, but that's encouraging to say the least. All right. Into the wire here in a Friday morning, TDR Trade to Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales, with Anthony Varrell. Time to bring in our special guest here on today's podcast, CEO of Glasshouse Brands. Welcome back, Kyle Kazan. It has been a while. Good to see you, my friend.
Hey, Shad. Hey, how you guys doing? Anthony, nice to see you as always.
Yeah. Good to see you again.
Well,
by the way, can I comment real quick? Japan, still really worth traveling to right now. I think the yen's about 146. It peaked at about 160, 161. Yep. So for all those folks that really enjoy travel, that's a country to go see right now before we start seeing things maybe level a little bit.
You are absolutely correct. I actually have a bunch of friends that are there right now, taking full advantage of the strength of the dollar.
Our CFO, we have some investors over there, so we were over there and we were drinking Japanese whiskey and just enjoying a strong dollar. And then I have to say, a lot of people don't realize Sundial and Zach. He was a meme stock.
Yeah, of course, right.
He raised a lot of capital as a meme stock and has actually turned it. Unlike GameStop, which I think is going to be headed for the trash heap eventually, Zach he's made that happen.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of what he did. He right place, right time, took opportunity of that meme stock mania, and then deployed the capital into things that actually mattered. He's done a bang up job. I'm very curious to see how that experiment unfolds in the long term, but there's a lot to definitely like in that SNDL story.
100%. I'm sure I can't wait to see your interview with him.
All right. So you travel to Japan a lot, drink a lot of sake or whatever, and you met with investors. So what's their view, the Japanese, when it comes to cannabis? Any idea?
So you'd have to imagine Asia, other than Thailand, is not really cannabis friendly.
No, I didn't think so.
I actually just took the family. Let me put it this way. I think Palau counts as Asia. They're pretty cannabis friendly. So is Guam. Guam's actually legal. So, but aside from that, when you talk about Japan, Korea, China,
Yeah.
it's a no-go. Now that said, you go, okay, well, why were you in Japan? It was talking about money. And if you're Japanese and you're a family office, and let's say you're a bit of a renegade, and you already have some U.S. operations, for them, they've been enjoying where they already had, they own things in the U.S. and Hawaii and New York and stuff like that. And so for us, a lot of what we've had to do, because it's cannabis, it's federally illegal. I know we're going to talk about that. And, Schedule 1, we've had to pay some pretty good rates to our investors to go. So they've been enjoying their yield hogs, and they're super smart. They get it. And the younger generation, educated here in the U.S. for college, and they also don't have that same Nancy Reagan Japanese-esque of no cannabis. They actually enjoy it. I think young people, once the U.S., that's gonna be the bellwether. Once the U.S. fully deschedules, you're going to start seeing things pick up around the world.
That's interesting. Well, one thing that I've learned, and it's you kind of had this idea, but now I think it's affirmative. This is a generational thing. I really do believe that. And I know that you're probably going to agree, and Anthony's in agreement too. But we were in Washington with Don Murphy a couple months ago, walking through the Dirksen building. And the big thing that caught my eye was just a lot of the politicians that are in place and the age that they are. It's a real eye opener.
It's smelling gay everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. But you bring up the whole Nancy Reagan era of just say no. And for those that are actually a little bit younger, back in the 1980s, there was a big PSA regarding the Reagan administration about the war on drugs, and obviously cannabis being at that forefront. But we saw some compelling data from Headset last week that outlined that 92.75% of people that took part in the comment period for rescheduling wanted it to be rescheduled. Almost 70% wanted to descheduled. And that's why we want to have you on, is because earlier this week, you submitted a letter to President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and former President Donald Trump, basically saying that we need to full-on deschedule cannabis and pardon all who have been incarcerated in federal prison for nonviolent marijuana offenses, which makes complete sense. So based off of this, do you think you're getting anywhere with this? If so, how?
It's a great question. And I appreciate you guys having me on about this really important subject. So let me just break it down. Start with Joe Biden. He's our current president.
Correct.
Although I think it's pretty obvious to everybody right now, the whole goal is to get Kamala Harris elected. That's what's happening in the Biden administration. He is basically not doing much of any. Yes, he was there ceremoniously bringing home some of our prisoners, which was great. But it's really now Kamala's world, and they're trying to minimize his public appearances and sort of distance. They're rebranding her right now.
Yeah.
But he still has the pardon pen, and we are fully expecting him to use it with one name for sure, and that's Hunter Biden. So we know that's coming.
Okay.
I mean, if anyone thinks, I know he said he wasn't going to do it, that's nonsense, right? I'm a dad. I'm pardoning my sons. It's going to happen.
Yep.
Either that, or I'm not going to have a wife. So, and I don't think it's a good look if you just pardon this guy, your son, who's a drug addict, when you've got certainly all these cannabis prisoners that you actually promised in the debate. It was a Democratic, just straight debate. So
good point.
So we are hopeful. I talk to a lot of the cannabis prisoners. I talk to Weldon all the time, and Weldon Angelos of Mission Green. And we are very hopeful that we're finally going to get some from Joe Biden. Now, the proverbial Lucy with the football, and I'm Charlie Brown and Weldon's Charlie Brown, is certainly on the table. But we believe that the Hunter Biden conviction, and also that he's set to go to trial here in Los Angeles for tax evasion charges, that they're just going to wipe those off the table, because anybody else would be really going to prison. And I think he would go to prison if he doesn't do that. So let's put a pin in that. Now let's talk about rescheduling, descheduling. I think Joe Biden reschedules the plant to Schedule 3. I think the numbers you said, we were taken aback. It was so overwhelming. Not totally surprised, but yes, at the same time going, where are the Kevin Sabets and all them? And clearly Kevin Sabet is a tiny fraction that's learned about, was it SAM or whatever, smart approaches to marijuana. He's just a prohibitionist and he's a shill for somebody. We just don't know who gives the money. But in any case, so we saw that, and now we look, all right, we're turning the page. We have a very tight election coming.
Yeah.
It's going to, right now, it looks to me as a toss-up. I will tell you, I don't vote Democrat. I don't vote Republican. I always vote Libertarian. So I don't really have a horse in this race. I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump, and I'm not going to vote for Kamala Harris. But, and with due respect to Boris, who is on your show, that believes it's a second term Kamala Harris, I would tell you, let me throw something else at you.
Okay.
I'm in California. She's from California. She is very close to our Governor Newsom. They both served together in San Francisco. They have a close relationship. I think they've resolved the fact that Gavin would like to move into 1600 and battle, but it's her race. That said, that's a very important product to California.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would, and also right now our Attorney General is also from California.
Okay.
He was not our Attorney General. He's the head of Health and Human Resources. He was our AG here. There is a lot of California, and so if Kamala wins, I would expect the time frame to be a little bit quicker because it would serve her state better. And we've gotten kicked in the balls under the Trump administration when they took away the SALT tax deduction, where we just now, if you're a high earner, you just get hammered. You can't deduct your taxes. So it would be almost a way to give something back to the three blue states, Washington, Oregon, and California. So I would say, I think it happens in her first term. If
You
she,
do.
I do.
You think descheduling could happen in her first term as president if she were to be elected?
I do. And the one thing that people, on Twitter, I get hammered quite a bit when I say the discussions we're having with the Trump administration, his stance has been pretty clear that it's a states' right thing.
We hear that everywhere. Yeah.
Okay. And that's been his abortion stance. And he basically changed the position of the Republican Party because many Republicans were like, they want a national ban. And Trump knows that's really a loser. I mean, we have a divided country. You take one side like that, you are just going to wipe out so many independents. So he just said, look, you got your state, you want to go make abortion basically illegal, go for it. But you can't do a nationwide ban. And that's where he's landed on cannabis. And that's everything we're hearing. There is a chance that I'll be meeting with Vice President Harris, and there's a chance I'll be meeting with former President Trump. There's things in the works. And just, I want to be very careful not to create any issues, but I'm hopeful that both candidates, and I'm agnostic when it comes to this here. I just think it's best for everybody to have this descheduled.
Absolutely.
What is your message then? Because there's a lot of things that, come to mind, but what do you think's the most important message you start that conversation off with either Vice President Harris or former President Donald Trump?
Americans want it overwhelmingly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like this is a democracy, and you're in such a close race where, what was Trump's thing in Georgia? Find me 11,000 votes. That's how close. I mean, the race is going to come down to like 100,000 votes across 5 states. I mean, is cannabis enough to turn, to move it? Sure. There's a bunch of things. Maybe it's a number 10 issue compared to the economy and the border and all the other stuff that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
But it's still an issue, and especially to the young people. So if you want to galvanize, and also, they're trying to get racial demographics. That's a big deal. So yes, I think it's a big enough issue that it's just easy to say I'm in favor of descheduling. I think it should be. I don't know if Ms. Harris will want to go more with some of the things that like Cory Booker and Chuck Schumer have done, where it's more of a nation thing. But the one thing I also want to say is, while I'm not happy about rescheduling, I want descheduling, and primarily because we have people just locked in cages.
Yeah.
And that's like 3,000. That's the thing that really that gets to me. That said, it would be, and hopefully will be very soon, a big step in the right direction. And I kind of teased you guys early this morning when I said, hey, 280E goes away. Maybe there's uplisting. But you know what's kind of interesting? It also allows advertising. Now you're going to go, okay, big deal. And I'm not anxious to do stuff here in California. I don't really care. But imagine for a second, because I don't think a lot of the prohibitionary states, which are usually more conservative, understand that under the hemp bill, they have basically legalized cannabis, without any tax, without any age restrictions. And so if we decided to turn one of our greenhouses that we have yet to turn on into something that's hemp, we could advertise in Texas to get your California weed from Glass House.
That's
and
crazy.
Right there, and we'll just send it to you. So literally, between the hemp bill,
it's wild.
And by the way, I'm not anti-hemp. I'm
not at all.
Let people do what they want to do, but don't put handcuffs on basically the same molecular plant with just a little bit of a nuance. So that's just stupidity. And as you've seen, you mentioned GTI earlier. They're in hemp.
Yes,
you mentioned Boris. He's in hemp. We haven't gone there yet, but literally, it's like it would not be a hard pivot for us to start doing that. So I just looked at it and I go, with the advertising and the hemp bill, we could come to Texas. Name a prohibitionary state, and all of a sudden you could see Glass House from California saying California weed, hemp compliant.
I mean, I could pull up my Instagram right now and I could probably scroll through about 20 videos and I would get Kiva ads coming up in my feed right away for their Delta 9 hemp derived products. So, I mean, with your connections and with the organizations that you're speaking with, are you seeing any sort of common ground or conversation towards amalgamating hemp and cannabis as really it should be from a regulatory perspective?
So you mentioned Don Murphy. I think he's about the sharpest person in DC on cannabis's behalf.
Yeah.
And I've met pretty much all the folks that are out there lobbying. He's great. But I would tell you, I'm not hearing that. And the hard part is where others, Scott and Christie at Kiva made the bet on hemp and it's working out. I know Cookies is doing that. So some of the California companies are leaning into it. My issue is the reason we haven't is because I know how quickly something can change. When all of a sudden someone goes, whoa, wait a minute. You mean a kid can go in and like to a gas station and buy a drink that basically is cannabis drink? I really think it's ignorance right now.
Huge.
And I think they could easily wake up tomorrow and just change that, overnight. So
yeah, well, we saw the governor of Missouri yesterday via executive order and intoxicating hemp products. Granted, that's probably going to get brought to the courts and it'll get challenged. Something will probably happen to refine it to a certain extent. But I mean, the Miller Amendment, I mean, you're seeing sweeping sweeping changes at the state level to protect the state regulated cannabis businesses from these, I don't even want to call them bad actors, because like I said, like you had said, I mean, I don't think hemp is an enemy. I just think hemp is doing its thing, acting within the regulatory framework that it's been granted. And I mean, the loophole there, and no one is wanting to change it. So you can't really blame them for that.
Yeah.
I wonder, because, we do a lot of game theory and whiteboarding on stuff. And this is one of the ones we talk about pretty often because, again, we've got 3 million square feet to turn on. We can turn on with, just a slightly different molecule, and you're smoking Glass House, only it's hemp. I'd rather not have to, basically have two product categories in a sense that way. That said, if that is the way of the world, and, the more politically active I've been over the years, I would tell you, yes, we live in a democracy, sort of. But if hemp makes enough money and starts deploying it smartly, they'll be able to hold off the votes.
Definitely.
And so they got Mitch McConnell on board. And so, for all those listeners out there that, just watch Fox or MSNBC and all that and think that money doesn't play the huge role in all the nonsense and all the virtue signaling and posturing. The real work that's done because of money in K Street.
That's
so cannabis doesn't really have much money. We've been chopped at the knees. 280E going away will fill some of our coffers and help. But that's going to be the race: is how much money can hemp makers make, and also do you start seeing tobacco and alcohol get into hemp, or do they go?
Becomes complicated. Becomes complicated.
We're not sure how it goes.
I think there's definitely nuance to that. I mean, one thing that a lot of people don't understand is hemp is ag, and ag in this country runs things in Washington. They have influence. They have historical precedent. They have very loud voices in Washington. I mean, I kind of wanted to retouch on descheduling, though.
Yep.
How do you envision that happening? Would that need to be a congressional act, or would that need to be via executive order if Kamala were to, let's say, get it done in her first term?
I think it would be handled two different ways by two different administrations. I think Kamala, if she becomes President Harris, I think she's come up through the Democratic Party, kind of the traditional way, city or county, state, and then federal, and now, just moving up. So she's part of the machine. And I think she would likely go the congressional way. I think she also would have to remember Obama and Bill Clinton had to learn. Same with George W. Bush. There's that learning curve that they come in on. So I think there's that. Then you have President Trump, who's much more of a business guy, and he's like, so I could see him saying, well, if they rescheduled through the administration, the cabinet, why wouldn't I just deschedule it? And I would expect him to just make bold moves like he did when he was president the first time. Now he also has 4 years under his belt of knowing how DC works. So I think it's going to be the tale of two cities. So then if you say, well, what if the Republicans win Congress, one house, would that slow it down? Don Murphy might tell you that they might be able to rally the votes. You do have the Nancy Maces out there, the Rand Pauls that are like, let's just take the knee off the neck of the industry. So, but I think just depending on who wins the election, it would be handled differently.
Crazy. Complicated, isn't it? So complicated.
But hey, if hemp does win and cannabis still gets held back, and I can advertise, you can imagine. I think no other company in the United States would freak out those conservatives when they see weed from California.
Yeah, I hear you.
Especially smokable weed that just says hemp bill compliant. I think that the problem is we do that probably doesn't help our new burgeoning business.
Yeah.
Because that would freak people out.
No, but I think it would reverberate through the powers that be that need to see the actual impact of what's going on. Because I mean, you are 100% correct in your assumption that the hemp market is a legal cannabis market. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a unregulated legal cannabis market that can do everything: bank, credit cards, advertise, D2C. It's sold in Total Wine down the street from me in Florida. That's in it. That in itself, if I didn't find it so ironic, and if I didn't see it as a little bit of a step forward as far as accessibility goes, I mean, it just makes absolutely no sense considering what we've been doing for the last 10 years in the cannabis sector.
Yeah.
Well, and your governor down there is pro hemp, but doesn't want Kim Truleave's bill.
Correct.
How do you reconcile that? And I either say it's ignorance or money. And unfortunately, exactly, because these people are not ignorant.
Yeah.
No, I firmly believe that DeSantis has an axe to grind against the Florida MMTC businesses, because you can't be for hemp and against cannabis when there's public consumption of hemp, there's people smoking hemp, smells the same as cannabis, has the exact same effect as cannabis. And if you want to talk about accessibility to youth can go into a gas station with a fake ID and buy pretty much whatever they want. I've done it. I'm sure both of you have done it back in your day. Try going into a cannabis dispensary with a fake ID and let me know how far you get.
Yeah.
You will not be able to purchase anything.
Do you need an ID to buy hemp is there an age restriction on hemp?
There's an age restriction.
Okay.
But that being said, like I said, I've gamed the system, liquor stores, gas stations.
What is it? Is it 21?
Is
it 21 or
21? It's 21, but it's not difficult.
Yeah.
Going into a cannabis dispensary, I mean, when I first started buying cannabis, even though I did have my med card and even though I did have an ID, even in California, when the adult market hit, going in to buy legal cannabis, it's still a little bit intimidating. As per going through the process, just the overall stringent nature of the process. You can't buy cannabis with a fake ID. You're gonna get popped.
Yeah. Kyle, look, to get anywhere, you got to have an audience. You got to have data to back yourself up when you start talking to some of these politicians. Currently, there's 3,000 individuals currently incarcerated in federal prison for nonviolent marijuana offenses, many of whom are serving life sentences. So for those 3,000 people still in prison, what's your message for them today?
So I communicate mainly by email, primarily with three. Parker Coleman's the one I've been talking about the longest because he's serving a life sentence. And we communicate. I would tell you, don't get caught up in the prison nonsense. Like literally, I was texting my one of my executive assistants last night, and I said I'm gonna connect with his folks, and she's like, what are you gonna say? And I'm like, it feels like it's so close. Just stay out of the nonsense because these people are serving hard time, maximum security with real criminals.
Yeah.
And you get caught up in something, you get some stupid violation or a crime in prison, and you never get out. And so my message right now is the cavalry is coming. The people are speaking loudly. And the best thing that's happened to you, and they bring it up too, talking about, Hunter Biden. So my message is hang in, it's going to happen. And I also think that either President Trump or President Harris administration, I think they would accelerate. And President Trump, he let out Harry O. He pardoned Weldon Angelos. He's got a little bit of a history, and we're talking to his people to really push that.
Yeah.
I teased on Twitter in a kind of an argument, and I hate to be cagey because I'd rather just be more radically transparent. But I'm talking today with somebody who's on his very short list for AG, and he has a good track record. He would be an amazing AG. For this. So, and that's part of what I'm gonna talk to him about is how do we educate President Trump? How do we as a cannabis industry show him that we support this kind of thing? And the same thing we're going to say to the Harris administration.
So you've outlined. Go ahead, Anthony.
No, I was going to say, just not to go off topic, but I mean, one thing that we have been seeing in Texas is municipalities decriminalizing, or at least making strides to decriminalizing cannabis. When I was thinking about it this morning, I mean, do you think that's a little bit putting the cart before the horse, since they don't even have a mature medical market and like access to product? Or do you think that that's actually going to be able to expedite people waking up and being like, we need true medical marijuana as well as adult use quicker than we're getting to it in Texas? So
when you decriminalize something, you almost legalize it, right?
Correct.
Because if the police can't arrest you, you can just use it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would tell you that, we've had no federal leadership on this. So it's always led by states, municipalities, things like that. And just so you know, the timeline, just to level set, 1996. So it's 28 years ago, California passed medicinal marijuana. We're 28 years into this. And we're talking about incremental changes in Travis County and, in Texas, Austin. But I would say anything is a positive. You've got some of these ideologues that, my conservative friends, I just don't understand, because they talk about freedom, they talk about this, that, and the other. And it's like, hey, if you really feel this way about the danger of marijuana, then why are you supporting alcohol and tobacco? Why aren't you a teetotaler? Right. And so there's all kinds of inconsistencies in their arguments. But I'll take decriminalizing. I think most police officers welcome that because they have other things to do.
Yeah, and that's another good point. I've heard overwhelmingly from law enforcement, we don't want to deal with cannabis. We don't need to deal with cannabis anymore.
It's like that
there is a much greater need for our time and resources elsewhere that doesn't have to do with cannabis.
So imagine for a second, I'm in Long Beach, California, which is the second largest city in LA County, which is one of the largest counties in the nation.
Yeah.
We used to have 1,000 police officers on the department. We now have 600.
Oh, wow.
So we're rationed down. They can't hire cops. And when they do, they're usually taken from another city and given a bonus.
Why is it like that everywhere? It's not just where you're at. I see that all over the country, even in parts of Canada as well.
There were a few awful situations that were really highlighted, George Floyd being one. And all of a sudden, I think, to speaking to my friends that are in law enforcement, they feel like the
way they've been portrayed on social media, it's like everybody hates them now.
Social media, I mean, the way that they're treated in person is deplorable. I mean, whenever I see someone in law enforcement, a lot of the time I say thank you, because that job right now, it is a hard job to do in the United States of America.
Yeah,
very, very tough.
And let's also remember that there are district attorneys in this country, including here in Los Angeles, that literally ran their campaign on, we're going to go get cops and put them in jail. So, and who are the best recruiters for military positions and police positions and fire positions? The people doing that job and their families. I have 2 boys. I don't want them to be in law enforcement. And I think it's an honorable profession. I mean, when people ask me during that time, my youngest, my millennials would say, are you ashamed that you're a police officer? And I said, should I be ashamed that when I got a 911 call from total strangers and a woman is getting beaten and screaming, that I ran in and risked my life? I mean, like, literally, my wife and I had a protocol. If I were mortally wounded or seriously wounded that I could die, that she'd bring the pets to the hospital so that they knew I didn't abandon them. I mean, I don't have that for my cannabis job. I had that when I was answering 911 calls, and there's people that will put a bullet in your head if they had a chance. So we really need, a police department that is, first we need a legislature that is coming up with fair laws. Like you just mentioned, decriminalize cannabis. The 600 police officers here in Long Beach, thankfully, don't have to deal with that.
Correct.
In Texas, they don't want to deal with it either. So let them deal with crimes persons and crimes property. If someone knocks you on the head with a pipe, you should go deal with that situation. They steal your car, they should go deal with that situation, or try and break into your house.
Yeah.
Smoking, and by the way, San Francisco did no favors to my argument, because I would legalize and regulate all drugs as the least worst option. But then you just can't let people just splay themselves out. That is unacceptable. You have to have some amount of common decency for everybody, and also treatment for people that are in crisis. And that's the one thing that I could walk you guys about 20 blocks down the street, and you'll see people in crisis.
Last thing I want to touch on is, look, you've outlined that Trump, basically has outlined that let the states decide. There's a few people on here that are basically saying, like, I don't believe a word that the Dems are saying related to cannabis. They haven't done anything in 4 years. What's your response to that? Has it changed? If so, why?
So you mentioned age when you visited DC. I think you might have, if you'd stopped at 1600 Pennsylvania, you'd have seen that too.
Yeah.
So I think if Kamala Harris is elected, again, California has a little bit of a different attitude when it comes to cannabis. And I'll tell you, he's not well loved by the cannabis industry she was a pretty heavy-handed prosecutor in
San
Francisco. That said, like me, who is involved in the drug war, that has spoken out loudly, you can change your position and you can educate people from where from what you've seen and been part of. So I would tell you that I think that her age, and also the Dems, anybody who says that has a right to say it, because they've done literally nothing to date. Literally nothing. They've just virtue signaled and BS'd us. That said, and maybe I'm just a cockeyed optimist, but I think you're going to see a change, because what the numbers that came out through the DEA that you mentioned at the top of the show were staggering.
Yeah.
And at some point, democracy has to win, or you're just, people are going to go, what the hell? And the illusion that we have a democracy starts cratering. So to keep the illusion up, hopefully they'll start listening to the people.
Yeah. Well, I know you'd said in your letter that, look, rescheduling doesn't solve the problems. I also do believe that it's a step in the right direction, but it brings attention and awareness, and it's incremental steps. So I think that's what we have to look at right now, because I know this industry from a long time has always want this big comprehensive approach where we want everything passed at once. And that's what ends up getting things stalled to have any progress. But let's get this out of the way. But appreciate you obviously checking in here and giving us a quick update on what you submitted. You mentioned 1996, 28 years ago. Where does time go? Where does time go?
I was a police officer at the time.
Crazy. And the number one,
by the way, I voted for it. I was like, I love this, because I used cannabis when I was young.
It just makes the thing that's frustrating, especially for, I guess, the younger generations. It just makes so much sense to legalize it. There's no argument against it. And when you look at the justification for Schedule 1, we could go down a whole different rabbit hole just talking about that, because there's nothing saying that it should have been Schedule 1 in the first place.
Yeah.
Except for some people's opinions on certain walks of life. I'll keep it at that.
Anthony, the leaning back on what Shad said about age, when you talk to the young consumers, and mind you, we're only in California. That's where I live. It's where I went to college. So I have a very California bent. But when you talk to the young people, and they don't have that propaganda against cannabis, and now for 10 years, they really haven't had that, because California was really pushing medicinal. So we were almost, everybody had a med card, way back in the day. So what you find is that change is going to come, because the next generation just sees it completely differently. So as the shark's teeth go through and the old die off and the young get older, I think you're just going to see that happen. And
it just can't get here fast enough. Right.
100%. And quite frankly, I'm excited by a tight election where they're going to have to be scrappy for every single vote. And I think that is just going to bode well for cannabis, because too many people, the numbers are just in our favor. So I'm really excited about it. And we're going to do everything we can to influence behind the scenes and try and cover our bets no matter who wins.
Yeah. Well, appreciate it. Robert Griffiths writes 1996 Atlanta Olympics, baby. Yes, I remember that. Michael Johnson in his gold shoes in that 200-meter dash. And then Muhammad Ali, you're right, holding the torch to let the games begin. But yeah, it was a lot of interesting stuff in the 96 Olympics. In case if you're taking notes too, the number one song 28 years ago this week, Kyle, was Macarena by the Bayside Boys Mix.
So I don't think the three of us need to bring that dance out.
No, I could do it right now, though, if I tried.
Oh, man.
I embarrass my children in so many ways. If they saw me on a podcast doing the Macarena, I think they might completely disown
yes.
Might need a couple joints before we bust out the Macarena on the live stream.
Good catching up with you, my friend. Keep in touch, okay?
Hey, Shad, Anthony, thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Kyle.
Right, thanks, Kyle.
Take care.
Oilers 48 also writes Donovan Bailey. He broke at the time the 100-meter dash, and then later actually ran in a 150-meter dash with Michael Johnson and him where
When
Johnson pulled up with his
I
hamstring pull.
I was 9 in 1996, so I was more so into, I guess, GI Joes and Ninja Turtles versus the Olympics that year.
BMW came out. They had the Z3 convertible. It was a brand new car back then, and they were
My mom
promoting the
actually
heck
had
out of
it.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Sweet little car.
All right, that wraps up Into the Wire. Let's now move on to our third segment and check out how these stocks performed this week. Arns, cue the music. Dan for the chart guys coming up. Good Friday morning, sir. How are you?
I'm great. How you doing?
Trying to find some duct tape to keep this, economy put together. But things are starting to unravel a little bit on the macro level. And I think that's something that you wanted to touch on off the top. But what are things, I guess, again, we cover obviously the cannabis space, but when you're looking at macro levels, what are you watching and how this is going to affect, obviously, other verticals like cannabis, for example?
The next big question for me is, do we confirm weekly downtrends? Because we had a period of euphoria and a grind up, just low volatility, slow grind up. And that generally, that ends fast and hard. And so we've gotten that now. We've gotten a lot of money leaving semiconductors, a lot of money leaving big tech that led the way up. And that money is going elsewhere, aside from the last 2 days. The last 2 days have been a different picture. But generally speaking, this morning, the healthcare sector hit all-time highs. The utility sector has been hitting all-time highs, a bit of a risk-off kind of mindset. Here's the NASDAQ the last 3 weeks. And, we just grinded up for a couple months. And then in 3 weeks, we get back a couple months of action. And so, again, when we finally find a temporary fear bottom, do we pull the grind back up forever? Or do we confirm the downtrend that tells us, okay, things have significantly shifted?
Yeah.
And that's the big one for SMH and QQQ, which have been leading the way down. The S&P 500 itself, again, doesn't look nearly as bad because of there is some rotation going on. We're in a weekly uptrend. Yes, we're down 5% plus from the highs, but you get 5 to 10% pullbacks, every so often in bull markets. And so the big question that we have, August, September, is this just one of those corrections that's going to lead to continuation, or is the top being set? And then, of course, you have all the fundamental aspects in play where you've got, the Fed now, after some economic data coming out the last few days, Fed looking to cut next meeting, maybe 50 basis points, maybe 50. I think one of the banks just said we're expecting 50 basis point cuts the next 2 meetings in a row. And so, the market is reacting to all this shift, and it's just creating a lot of volatility. And this is the first fear that we've seen since April. And so it's just a reminder that things shift. You get complacent. Bulls get complacent on the slow grinds up. And how that impacts cannabis is, again, if everything is selling off like it has been the last 2 days. Yesterday, I was very impressed with how well cannabis held up. MSOS was a little bit red, but today playing a little bit of catch up. Last week, we talked about the head and shoulders patterns here, talked about it on MSOS, talked about it on CGC. Both have confirmed. And so again, I couldn't come on here and say these are going to be head and shoulders patterns, but I could lay out, we know a daily lower high is the most likely scenario. We must be cautious of. I suggest people go back and watch last week to just see, someone who is a full-time trader, not predicting. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but the moves that we've seen over the last week of trading are not surprising at all.
Yep. Sideways is with a term that we used last week, right?
Yeah. And so now we've got MSOS back down to the $7, $6.80 range. If we hold it, we remain sideways for another few weeks. The goal for the bulls at this point, hold this level until the broader market can find a bottom and alleviate some fear. The VIX right now, which spikes in market weakness, this is the biggest spike since COVID right now. And so again, that's just showing the big fear environment and people, seeking protection from this drawdown. And obviously, if you're seeking protection in the broader market, you're not jumping into cannabis stocks. That's the last place that bulls are going to be going. So the sideways is until we get a catalyst, and bulls just hoping that this broader market fear doesn't drag us down to fresh lows.
But you were somewhat surprised at how well this industry did perform or respond based on what's going on the macro level, is what you said?
I mean, there are periods over the last 2-3 years where if the broader market were doing this, the cannabis space would be down 20% in the last, week of trading. So that's a benefit. If you look out at the broader market, we'll take sideways. We're really frustrated with sideways when the broader market's ripping, but when it's dumping, we'll take sideways while we patiently wait for the fall.
Yeah, it is what it is right now. Well, there was some news this week. It involved the cannabis and Varrell holdings in a big announcement that was back on Monday. So let's bring up the cannabis chart. I know we looked at this last week. It was in a tough situation, but based off the news, what'd you see?
Yeah, it was just that tightening range, just sideways, and then you get that big volume. That's where it stands out. I mean, look at the volume compared to the previous day.
Yeah,
you compare the last 2 days, Thursday and Friday, you had a total of, we'll call it 270,000 shares traded. And then that one day you get 1.4. So you're talking a 500% increase in the prior 2 days combined volume. That tells you huge volume, obviously responding. We got the bull break of resistance, and now we're holding on very well comparative to the sector. So that's a perfect example of how the news can break correlations.
No kidding.
We're doing the exact same thing as the sector. News comes in, volume comes in, and we break that correlation. And so what the bulls want to see from here is this previous resistance zone, hold that as support and form a higher low and keep this constructive. And of course, it looks like we got earnings coming up. Always double check TradingView. Their dates are often wrong for this sector, but we certainly have a bunch of earnings coming up in this sector.
All right. The flip side of that announcement was Varrell Holdings. What'd you see?
Honestly, you show me this chart and I wouldn't know there was any news. It's just that sideways, slow grind, no volume, nothing going on. So we're looking for a higher low compared to 335, and we can easily trade within this tightening range for another couple of weeks. Obviously, the earnings upcoming could break us out of this sideways range, but again, just draw those larger pivots, and if we are not breaking those larger pivots, then nothing is changing. And if there's anything to gather, at least the people that are not actively trading this space don't have to be checking in on the charts multiple times a day because not much is going on.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, we had two companies that reported their earnings this week, which was Tilray, SNDL as of this morning. So for Tilray, which reported on, or do I have Juicy? Do I have Juicy up next?
Doesn't matter. We can do whatever you want.
We can pivot on the spot, right? You're that good. Anyway, let's go Juicy, actually. They announced a refinancing earlier this week. So based off of that news, how did they respond for the remainder of the week?
Again, this chart shows no news to me. No volume, no volatility. We are just sideways, and we're towards the lower end, just like MSOS. We're sideways, but we're closer to support than resistance. So the bears have a little bit of favor in that regard. But yeah, it's just slow grind, summer, nothing going on.
Yeah. All right, let's now move to the Canadian side. Like I said, two companies that reported their earnings this week, which is Tilray and SNDL. Tilray was Monday. So for the week, again, did we see much of anything?
So there was a nice amount of volatility. We had the big bull move up. We then, that the range of that day then becomes the most important thing in the short term. And you can see we tried to head back to resistance. We failed, and then we broke support. So that's bears winning the short term there. But I drew this downtrending resistance line on the long-term time frames after the bull reaction. And this was just, this didn't mean a lot to me. I just put it up there and said, well, I'm going to keep an eye on this. And if we reject, then it's going to mean something to me. And so now we have this big upper wick pulling back right from there. And so now I'm paying attention a good bit more. We know we have our base 160 to 165, very solid support. Okay. But, now we have a new resistance level. And again, just like everything else, if we're going to keep tightening up, we can easily do so into September. But the burden is on bears to set a weekly lower high, and they would need to break 180 support first thing next week for that to happen.
Well, it's clear. Even when earnings are strong, which I'm predicting will be the case during earnings season, we're still going to get this sideways action, I think, for this space. Just hold strong and get us to the fall is what I keep hearing the theme over and over again, right?
And what is notable for the cannabis sector, which always happens, is retail, I almost said an inappropriate term, retail uses up their cash right away on the open. And it's you see it in USMJ all the time, where if there's something, some kind of news, this is the vice president, whatever, there's a bull reaction in the first hour. And then you know that anybody that's going to buy that news has bought, and there's no more buying pressure left. And then we just do that slow fade. And it's the same thing with TLRY on the earnings there, where anybody that's going to buy the earnings reaction did so in the first 45 minutes. That's it. There's not enough demand to outweigh anything from that point forward. You don't have the sustained all day buying that a bullish stock will generally see.
Don't buy everything all at once, right?
Yes.
Next up, SNDL. They reported earnings this morning. Still a little early, but what are you seeing? Anything?
So we knew the weekly lower high was the most likely scenario. And again, I talked about this being a possible long-term head and shoulders. I said last week, I think it was, I don't think that's going to confirm by breaking support. If it did, it's a big red flag for the sector as a whole, because that means everything's dropping to new lows most likely. But we are going to look for a higher low compared to that 181 support. And you guessed it, a longer term tightening range. And we can easily stay within this one for a few weeks. But this was another daily head and shoulders confirming. Head and shoulders is just higher lows and higher highs, an uptrend, to then a lower high and lower low. It's, a lot of people look at shapes and things. It's literally just this change from higher lows and higher highs, lower highs and lower lows. It's just a trend change happening in front of you. And that's just a perfect example. Let's just draw it real quick. Higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, lower high. There's your downtrend. So just watch those trends.
Yeah, no kidding. One company I continue to bring up every single week, and it just continues to perform. MindMed.
So MindMed, yeah, we got the big bull break. And again, you got to take profit into these kinds of moves. If you're going up 50% in 3 weeks, take some off. Don't fear. If it's a position that you don't care if it goes to zero, whatever, then fine. Let it run for however long you want. But this is where we have to sell some into euphoric strength so we can buy consolidation. You don't have to sell everything. You can sell partial. Yep. But now we knew the big move off the bottom. We still have to confirm a weekly uptrend eventually. And now that's what the bulls have to do. So if we're going to continue progressing from here, we must hold that 671 low and eventually break that 983 high where we topped out. And again, the broader market backdrop here is definitely impacting things. Over the past few days, the biotech sector and IWM, the Russell 2000, which are some indications of a risk-on mindset in the market, are dumping really hard with the whole market. So that is impacting things as well. Again, it's just sentiment. You don't have to have a tick-for-tick 5-minute correlation. It's sentiment. Very clearly, we are in a fear period over the last specifically 2 days, and it's coming from complacent euphoria. And it's just these cycles that keep shifting. And so now the question is, when does this current period of fear stop and put in a bottom? It looked like, going back to the S&P 500, it looked like the FOMC day that was it. We had a big move up, and the NASDAQ had its strongest day of the year. And then in 2 days, we dump and give it all back. And so that was kind of, bulls are like, all right, we're in the clear. We got this now. And then they just get jacked in the face and blindsided and surprised. And you can see it on social media, just a wave of fear of, wait, is this the top? Are we about to dump for the next 6 months? And that's the way it goes.
It's the world we live in, right?
Yep.
Listen, always get catching up. And again, it's just the same sentiment, but it's good just to get a reminder every single week as to how this industry is performing. Again, we continue to reiterate that it is sideways right now. Earnings season will be telling, obviously, as well. But I think that's just the big catalyst moment we keep saying each and every week is what we're waiting for come fall time. But appreciate the update.
Yeah, and just to note their names, right now we have MSOS right near its bottom, maybe 4 or 5% away. But then you look at a name like TrueLeave, which, again, because the Florida catalyst has my attention, but, we can drop 15% plus before we get to the recent low. So there is differences in these individual names. They're all roughly doing the same thing, but there are pockets of relative strength and relative weakness.
Okay, good to know. All right, check back with you next Friday. Okay, sir?
All right. Actually, I'm away next Friday. I'm taking a van to Oregon and bouncing around in the backcountry, so I'll be serviceless.
That's amazing. So you're flying out where? And then
flying out to Portland, renting a van. I used to live out of my car and road tripping all around the country doing national parks, and so this is a throwback to a decade ago.
What's the beach out there in Oregon? Is it Cocoa Beach in Oregon?
I'm not sure. I'll find out. I definitely have
taken the Highway 1, coastal highway along there.
Yep, I've done that before, and I'm gonna circle around and then hit up the coast and go up the coast of Oregon.
And man, no one has ever not done that drive. Put that on your bucket list. What a drive that is. Have fun and check out of the world. And you don't really need to know what's going on day to day. That's for sure. But listen, have fun, and we'll check back in with you in 2 weeks. Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Dan. All right, we'll bring up Mr. Varrell back. That was interesting, but it sounds like the same sentiment, even though there was some news. But we saw a heavy increase of volume with the cannabis from Monday's news. Last Thursday and Friday was a couple 100,000, and then we went to 1.4. Well, let's hope that is the same kind of sign for companies like that if there is rescheduling announced prior to the election. But all in all, good show. Thought Kyle was great, and comments are flooring in. But I think that wraps up today's show, bud.
So yes, and hold on 1 second.
Yeah, keep in mind too, August 11th, the FDA is rumored to be giving a ruling on Lykos's MDMA protocol. So that'll be interesting to see.
I know that we reported that Ben Kovler said one thing. I know Tom had reached out to the Ohio authority that didn't say the contrary, but just said that none of the COs have been issued yet. It's there is from the Columbus Dispatch that there have been adult use COs for retail granted, 2 of them being for Cresco in their Cincinnati and Winterville locations.
There you go.
Adult use sales will start in Ohio next week. And my shirt is Amendment 3 in Florida.
Yes on 3.
Which it's Yes on 3, Smart and Safe Florida, if you want to go check out the campaign with everything else that they have going on.
Did you buy that online?
That's great news for Cresco. Yes.
And then actually, let's give a shout out to that. If people want to learn more about that, especially the Floridians that are watching this podcast right now, where do they go?
Smart and Safe. I think it's smartandsafe.com. They can also follow it on Twitter. And I mean, you can just follow my Twitter feed. There's tons of stuff on there for Yes on 3 and Smart and Safe.
Yeah.
SmartandSafeFlorida.com.
Good stuff. All right. Well, you enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm in my small little town right now up in here in Canada this weekend. There's a little band called Stone Temple Pilots that's playing at a concert this weekend. I'm like showing my.
Are they?
Yeah. The only thing
is Scott Weiland still tour with them?
He's dead.
Is he?
He's dead. He died. I forget what year he passed away.
Scott Weiland? I knew Chris Cornell died. I didn't know Scott.
Oh yeah. He died, man, I think like 10 years ago.
That's like seeing
yeah.
I don't know if I would see the Stone Temple Pilots without Scott Weiland.
Well, that's just it. I don't think I'm going to go, but I'm sure there are lots of people will. In the meantime, make sure to subscribe to our Baked In newsletter. QR code there at the bottom right-hand corner. Again, we're getting some great traction for all of you people that are subscribing. Thank you very much. We very much appreciate it. Air Wellness, our latest research report. So if you want to learn more about Air Wellness leading up to the earnings season next week, make sure you get a good read from that from our lead analyst, Bill McNarland. In the meantime, you, sir, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you back here on Monday, hopefully to get a representative from Ohio on to talk about adult use going live. In the meantime, enjoy your rest of your week.
Emailing Charlie as we speak.
Good stuff. Hopefully to have him on Monday. Enjoy the rest of your day, okay? Everybody have a great weekend. Take care. See you Monday.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching our latest podcast. Lots of momentum building. You guys getting all excited? Leave comments below. Again, we want to take this viral. Smash that like button and make sure to click on that bell for all notifications as we start to bring on bigger and bigger guests. Don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, the Baked In newsletter, by logging on to thedalesreport.com. And we want to take this viral, as I said, and make this community grow. So make sure to subscribe on that channel because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.